In the following tutorial, we will be covering all the units in Module 5 of the book, Philosophy and Logic. This GST is from National Open University of Nigeria. My name is Dan Asukwo, your instructor. Are you writing any of the GSTs soon, or you want to improve your knowledge on philosophy and logic? If so, let us know on the comment section so that we can help you out. If you will need a summary of the book, let us know at the comment section. If you are a NOUN student or from any other universities, this will be very useful for you. Please do well to share it with others as well as on your study groups. Why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Module 5, Argument Forms and Law of Thought. Unit 1, Argument Forms 1.0. Introduction. This study unit introduces you to the various forms of arguments in philosophy and logic 2.0. Intended learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, you'll be able to analyze arguments forms in solving communication issues. 3.0. Main content 3.1. Argument forms. Having defined and discussed what statement and statement forms are all about, you should always remember that an argument form is to arguments what statement form is to statements. Logicians define an argument form as any sequence of symbols containing statement variables, but no statements, such that when statements are substituted for the same statement variable throughout the result is an argument. There is at least one fundamental difference between statement form and argument form. In the statement form and its substitution instances, while in that of argument form reference is made to argument form and its substitution instances. 3. 1.1. Modus ponens. This is the simplest type of valid argument form that is constructed with hypothetical conditional statements. The argument form of modus ponens can be read as follows. If this happens, then that will follow. This happens, therefore that follows. In a symbolic form, the argument form of modus ponens become thus, P_QP. Therefore Q. Of course, P here represents the antecedent, while Q represents the modus ponens argument form corresponds to the first rule of inference earlier stated. You should also keep in mind that modus ponens is any argument that affirms the antecedent of the first premise in the second premise, and affirms the consequent of the first premise in its conclusion. For instance, when we say, if all men are mortal, then Bola is mortal. All men are mortal. Therefore Bola is mortal. The form of this argument is as follows. P_QP, therefore, Q. However, you should bear in mind that any argument form that denies the antecedent is invalid and therefore commits the fallacy of denying the antecedent. 3. 1.2. Modus tollens, P_QQP. From the above, you can see that the characteristics of modus tollens argument form is that it always denies the consequent. So, you should always remember that any argument that denies the consequent of the first premise in the second premise in its conclusion is of the modus tollens form. For instance, when we say, if all men mortal, then Bola is mortal. Bola is not mortal. Therefore, all men are not mortal. The form of this argument is as follows. P_QQ, therefore P3, 1.3, hypothetical syllogism, P_QQ_R, therefore P_R. What makes hypothetical syllogism unique is that the first premise and conclusion have the same antecedent, the second premise and conclusion have the same consequent, and the consequent of the first premise is the same as the antecedent of the second premise. So any hypothetical syllogism that follows the above character is a valid one. For instance, when we say, if Bola is a father, then he has children. If he has children, then he has a wife. Therefore, if Bola is a father, then he has a wife. The form of this argument is as follows. P_QQ_R, therefore P_R3, 1.4 disjunctive syllogism, PVQ, therefore Q. As the name says, disjunctive syllogism is that form of argument that has a disjunction as first premise. It is unique in the sense that although the second premise always denies or contradicts one of the two disjuncts of the first premise, it goes on to validly infer in the conclusion that the other disjunct is true. Take the following example. Either Tope will cook or Tope will eat in the restaurant. Tope will not cook. Therefore, Tope will eat in the restaurant. The form of this argument is as follows. PVQP, therefore Q. Always remember that in a disjunctive syllogism, any of the two disjuncts can be negated. And if the first disjunct, for instance, is negated, the second become automatically true and vice versa. This is the principle of any disjunctive syllogism. 4.0. Conclusion. This study unit dealt with the rules of inference and argument forms. It is clear to you now that logicians acknowledge at least 4 common forms of arguments, which are modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. 5.0. Unit 2. Laws of Thought. 1.0. Introduction. This study unit introduces you to the laws of thought as laid down by Aristotle. According to the Greek philosopher Aristotle, these principles or laws can be classified as follows: law of identity, law of non-contradiction, and law of excluded middle. 2.0. Intended learning outcome. By the end of this unit, you will be able to analyze sentences and statements using the law of thought. 3.0. Main content. As stated earlier, Aristotle laid down these 3 principles or laws of thought, which are our main concern in this unit. These laws are 1. Law of identity, 2. Law of non-contradiction, and c. Law of excluded middle. 3.1. The law of identity. The law of identity is always stated as follows: A is A. Here A stands for anything whatever. The originality of this law is that it simply states that anything is what it is. For example, A is A, B is B, and C is C. Everything you say presupposes that thing. For instance, if you speak of a car, you are presupposing that a car is a car. You should also keep in mind that the law of identity, A is A, does not give you specific information concerning the qualities of A. It only tells you that A is A, that is, whatever A happens to be, the thing is itself and nothing else. It does not matter what the A is made to represent. The law of identity is always true. Logicians call it a tautological statement because the statement A is a necessary truth. Moreover, the statement a car is a car can never be false. 3.2. The law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction states that nothing can be both a and not a. According to the law, if this is A, then it cannot at the same time be A. For instance, if this is a chalk, it cannot be anything else than a chalk. If this is a house, it cannot be anything else than a house. It must be one or the other. It cannot be both. It must either be A or not ta. If it happens to be A and not ta, then it becomes self-contradictory. The only way to avoid self-contradiction is to obey the law of non-contradiction. 3.3. The law of excluded middle. The law of excluded middle is the third law of thought, and it states that everything is either A or not A. As it indicates, the law of excluded middle excludes the middle ground between A and not A. According to the law, everything must choose to be either A or not A. It cannot choose to be neither. For instance, this is either a car or not a car. It cannot be neither a car nor not a car. It must be either a house or not a house. It must be one or the other. According to the law of excluded middle, you cannot refuse to be this and also refuse to be the other. The overall aim of these laws of thought is to set patterns for anyone who wants to think and speak correctly. Their main duty is to ensure consistent and non-self-contradictory thinking, speaking, and writing. For instance, the law of identity tells you that a thing is what it is and nothing else. The law of non-contradiction tells you that a thing must be one thing or another thing. It cannot be that very thing and be another thing at the same time. The law of excluded middle tells you that a thing must be one thing or not that very thing. It cannot be neither that very thing nor not that very thing. It must be one or the other. These laws of thought are very important because they are presupposed in all our speech whenever we speak about anything. 4.0. Conclusion. This study unit dealt with different laws of thought. There are generally 3 standard laws of thought laid down by the Greek philosopher Aristotle, 384–322 BC. These laws are: 1. The law of identity. 2. The law of non-contradiction. 3. The law of excluded middle. 5.0. Summary. To get the best of this unit, you may need to replay it again. Also, drop a comment on the comment section stating the important lesson learned. Discussion forum. In your context, identify 2 issues each that involve argument forms and law of thought. State the issue and analyze. Post on the comment section.